ﷺ himself did that during salah. Like just with his hands. أشار بيده يعني يركع
And the ishara in this case has a specific position. It's not like waving. It's not even raising the hand. The way the Prophet ﷺ did it, if you are to do it, try to avoid fard, obviously, sunnah. He did that. The back of his hand was up, so he did that. In return for salam, yes, like this. In return, in response for salam, that's sunnah. Or he did it, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
And then they mentioned if you read an ayah like Ya Yahya khudh al-kitaba biquwwa, and there's a person named Yahya in front of you, are you able to speak to them and say Ya Yahya khudh al-kitaba biquwwa? Say no, you're not allowed to speak to them and say Ya Yahya, or udkhuluha bisalam. Someone knocks on the door and says udkhuluha bisalam, right?
And there was an imam one time, he made a mistake in the Quran and nobody is fixing, and he was saying rudduha alay. This is a part from the ayah rudduha alay, like fix me, which is rudduha alayya fatafiqa mashan. One ayah, so you cannot use one or part of an ayah from the Quran to communicate with somebody else with the purely intention of communicating with someone else, because salah aqwalun wa af'alun makhsusa. It's a specific sayings and actions meant to communicate with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not with people.
And then
there's another story. There was one time an imam who was praying on salah, and as he was praying, this was back home, a serpent or a snake came in front of him, like it was kind of an open masjid. So the imam, he stopped reciting, and then he stopped, and then they gave him some time, and he wouldn't continue because he was just following, seeing what the snake would do. So the person behind him, he wanted to correct him. The imam was reciting Surah Taha. So the next ayah was خُذْهَا وَلَا تَخَفْ, that grab it and don't be afraid. So the imam turned around, he said خُذْهَا تعال خُذْهَا أنت.
We can go on and on and on with all of these things. Okay, one more. So that happened. I was there. So an imam made a mistake, and somebody, it was Surah Ali Imran. And then in the beginning of Ali Imran, تغلبون وتحشرون قل للذين كفروا ستغلبون وتحشرون إلى جهنم. Somebody behind him, this is the right way. The imam said it right. The other person behind him said ستحشرون وتغلبون. He's saying no, other way around. And then the imam said it the way he knows it, which is the right way. The other person said ستحشروا. They kept going back and forth 2-3 times. And then the imam said it's ستغلبون وتحشرون. That other one was somewhere, I forgot where was it. The person next to me, they kept back and forth. The one fixing is insisting, the imam is insisting, and then the person next to me was like that's the fiqh of fixing, actually. That's why we appoint one person, because it might be right, but 5-6 people saying the same thing at the same time, the imam would not get it. So that's why we make sure that one person is there for fixing.
Just on the topic of fixing, one sheikh, he mentioned a very beautiful principle. He said that if you ever need to fix an imam, your intention should be what you fix in a way that is the most beneficial for the imam. So the place that you start from, the point that you fix, when you fix, that should all be taken into consideration. Because sometimes a person may fix the imam, but he starts from like a word that like the imam would just get confused, in terms of trying to correct his recitation.
Moving forward to sujood al-tilawa, because I'm trying to cover as much as we can. Sujood al-tilawa, there are 14, scholars disagree whether there are 14 more or less, positions, places in Quran where when you pass by them you make sujood. This sujood, is it wajib or mustahab? Is it obligatory or recommended? Imam Abu Hanifa believes it's wajib. You have to make sujood when you pass by this. But other scholars believe it's sunnah, which is the majority of the scholars. So you may or may not. Better to make sujood al-tilawa, but you don't have to. And also they disagree. Do I need wudu for that if I am not? Is it part of salah? That will go back to it being part of salah. Obviously, if it is salah, you consider it like salah. You need wudu for it, or tahara. If not, then they would not stipulate wudu for it.
I wish I wanted to mention like some stuff that we just skimmed over. One of them is that like if you read in the Quran, the Shaykh mentioned and someone said Assalamu alaikum, the scholars disagreed. Nawawi says al-Azhar is to say wa alaikum assalam, but then others said it's better just keep going and not even like do salam, or just with the ishara, just with a gesture. And then he mentioned that if someone إذا ورد عليه like أي القارئ من له فضيلة بعلم أو صلاح أو شرف فلا بأس بالقيام للاحترام. Imam Nawawi actually wrote a book on this. He said, you know, all the ahadith and the athar about the sunnah of standing up for the people of nobility or the people of goodness, because some people, you know, they say that you're not supposed to stand up and something, which actually is a misunderstanding of the hadith. If you look at all the hadith together, you come with the conclusion that's actually a good thing to stand up for someone of honor, and the ahadith that say you shouldn't stand up are specific if you're standing up out of riya, out of, oh, you know, you want like people to see you, you want to get, you know, like مثلا it's a zalim or someone like this political, and you want to get like something, you know, good favor with these political authorities. Imam Nawawi, you know, he has a book on that, rahimahullah. And then he has a fasl on Ameen. And of course, we know when you say Ameen, it's Allahumma astajib. Basically, the meaning of Ameen, like, oh Allah, accept. It's a dua when we say Ameen. And the Prophet ﷺ said that if you, as a follower, say Ameen, من وافق تأمينه تأمين الإمام غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه.
تأمين الملائكة.
تأمين الملائكة or تأمين؟
تأمين الملائكة. So Ameen is one of the very important things that, you know, it's not part of Quran. Saying Ameen is not Quran in itself, but it's very highly recommended, if not wajib, after the Imam when he recites Al-Fatiha. And when you say Ameen, if it just coincides with the Malaika, because they say Ameen as well, yeah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive you. I want to really skip forward because it's the last session to Adab al-Khatm, unless the Mashayikh, they are free to share whatever they want. There are some adab to finish the Quran and to attend the Khatm al-Quran. Some of these we have talked about how long, in how long should everybody try to consider making Khatma. But generally speaking, al-Khatm is one of the special times when you are about to conclude the recitation of the Quran or attend Majlis al-Khatm. They used to make Majlis for the Khatm. It's they used to make dua. Sayyidina Anas ibn Malik used to gather his family and make special dua for finishing the Quran, and it is said that dua is mustajab. There's a lot of barakah around that time. It is recommended to finish it either in the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. Obviously, it can be done at any time, and even it's said that some of the Salaf, they recommended to make fasting, to make siyam on the day you are finishing the Quran. It is recommended to attend the Majlis al-Khatm. By the way, alhamdulillah, we have at least one Khatma this past year. Bifadlillah in Salah, we are finishing the second Khatma right before Ramadan. We're making it to the end of Juz' Amma. We should be finishing any time before Ramadan, inshallah, during Salah, which is very highly recommended for everybody to attend, and we normally send it on the group. And it is recommended at Sunnah, once you finish Khatm, is to move on to Surah Al-Fatiha. You finish Surah Al-Nas, go ahead to Surah Al-Fatiha, and then get the first 5 ayat of Surah Al-Baqarah, the first portion. خَيْرُ النَّاسِ الْحَالِ الْمُرْتَحِلِ. The Prophet ﷺ said the best of all people are al-hal al-murtahil. Hal is somebody who is resident and then he travels, and then he becomes a resident, he travels, he's going in a circle. He refers to the person with the khatma. You recite, you finish, connected. And that is the norm of the scholars. When we finish one khatma, it doesn't stop at An-Nas. They normally go to Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen and then the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah.
And some of the places that we studied with, you know, they would do khatma every single month. You know, there would be a khatam. Other places that we studied at, every single Friday after Fajr, there would be a khatam. Right, mashallah. Like, you know, it would always be khatmas and khatmas. And there's such a mubarak thing. And one of my mashayikh said that in Afghanistan, when the mujahideen in Afghanistan were fighting the Soviet Union, no one in the world thought the mujahideen would ever beat the Soviet Union. You know, this great empire and everything, right? You know what they did? All the mashayikh in Afghanistan, they decided, they were like, let's do many khitmas. And at the end of the khitmas, we're going to donate the reward of the khitmah to the fighters, to the mujahideen. And they did that, and subhanAllah, you know, you see what happened. You know, today they said, let's do as many khitmas as we can and donate them to those resisting oppression in Gaza and Palestine and you know, the Muslims that are oppressed and fighting oppression around the whole entire world, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know, gives nasr to them. Because as we hear from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we see in the Sunnah, you know, there used to be hibat al-thawab, you know, Allahumma hab مثل هذا الثواب هذه الختمة or هذا whatever good deed li ruh كذا وكذا, you know.
And that's actually one of the ahkam that the fuqaha talked about. Can you give as a gift the thawab, the reward of the recitation of Quran. There's some scholars who said no. Why? Because we don't have a dalil, a specific dalil or evidence from the Quran or the Sunnah. And that's true. There's no specific dalil. We do have a dalil that the sadaqah, you can give in sadaqah on behalf of somebody else. Somebody, he said, Ya Rasulullah, inna ummi ftutilat ruhuha, my mother just passed away. All of a sudden, I think if she would live longer, she would give in sadaqah. Can I give in her behalf? Yes, you can. Another person, man or woman, can I make hajj on behalf of my mother? Yes, you can. So we have several things like that that were mentioned in the hadith. But the scholars, fuqaha, they said, if you can make hajj on behalf of, which is ibadah, of your father and mother, which involves a lot of recitations, a lot of movements, a lot of spending of money, why not for Quran? And the approved opinion from amongst the majority of the scholars that this can be done. You can do the Quran. However, if it became like big shots everywhere, not big shot, but I mean like it's number one thing that most people or a lot of people I have seen they go for, which is nothing bad. But why don't we, start with giving sadaqah, maybe making umrah or hajj if they didn't make it, and make dua, obviously it reaches them. Along with that, we can recite Quran as well. But just picking up and choosing Quran, it is still good, but you have skipped item 1, 2, and 3, and then went to 4, which is disagreed upon. Majority said, okay, it would be good, inshallah.
One of the other benefits they mentioned is when a person is completing the Quran, it's good for others to join the khatma. So Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu, it's been reported from him that whenever he would finish the Quran, he would gather his family, he would gather his children. And I believe it's also been narrated from some of the companions that when they would finish the Quran, they would gather their families and they would make dua. So attending, if you know that there's a majlis and when someone is about to finish the Quran, it's good to attend. Or if you yourself are finishing the Quran, then it's good to have other people present. And Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, he brings some different quotes from scholars that, at that time the mercy descends. And I'm not sure if it's authentic or not, but they also mention that at that time dua is accepted, and so forth. And it's also mentioned from Abdullah bin al-Mubarak, the first Abdullah bin al-Mubarak, that at that when he would finish the Quran, he would also make it a point to make dua for all of the Muslims. So Allahumma fil muslimina wal muslimat wal mu'minina wal mu'minat, and so forth. And Imam Nawawi, he mentions many other du'as that you can make for the Muslims and for the ummah as a whole.
And one of the blessings Allah SWT gave me is allowing me to live with my grandma, because it allows me to see the sunnah in practice. MashaAllah, she's a person who reads Allah yahfadha ya Rabb, the Quran all the time, like every single day, like so many ajza, and for her khitmas are frequent. So every time she has a khitma, yallah, نجيب الأحفاد والأولاد and the whole entire, everyone comes and she does the khitma and makes dua, mashallah, at the end of her khitma.
And since we were talking about grandmas, I have a story from Usayram that he shared with me a long time ago, and it's some kind of karama. Karama is like the miracles for prophets. Karama is like a miracle for normal people, and I've seen that happening.
My dad used to tell me that my grandmother, rahimahullah, she used to recite Al-Quran 5 ajza a day. She used to recite it. And he used to tell me that when he would be reciting the Quran, and this was years ago when she was younger, that sometimes he would be making a mistake and she would correct him. She wasn't a hafidha, but she would correct him because of how much she read the Quran. So a few years before she passed away, she came to America, and at that time she had severe dementia. So at certain states, she wouldn't know where she was. At certain states, she wouldn't even recognize, my dad. So one day, my dad and I, we were sitting in our living room, and I'm reciting Al-Quran, and my grandmother's sitting on her wheelchair, and we thought she was sleeping, that, she was out of it. And I read an ayah, and instead of saying Mursalun, I said Mursalin. And she got up and she said, correct it. Like she pointed at me, she said Mursalun. And she caught the mistake. SubhanAllah, she wasn't, like at that moment, I don't even know if she was aware of what was happening, but it was like an instinct for her. The moment I made the mistake, she corrected me, and she wasn't a hafidha. But she read it so much that it was a reflex for her.
So,
Allah Azza wa Jalla have mercy upon her.
Something very similar happened to me, but that's what my sheikh, one of my shuyukh that I used to read to. He was in a different, I'm from a village, he's the next village over. So I would go to him, you have to go after Fajr, and there's a long line, a lot of people. If you can catch one ruba, that would be amazing. So, and the sheikh he was very old, Sheikh Muhammad Abdul Ghani rahimahullah, very old. And he was like this, literally asleep, and you can listen to him snoring like this, wallahi. And I'm reciting and I'm trying, is he aware or what? and then I make a mistake. Let's say I forgot what mistake. I say يعملون and it's يؤمنون. I say الذي يعمل يؤمنون. Wallahi, that's subhanallah. So the last chapter, or one of the, getting to the last chapter, في وجوب تعظيم القرآن, dealing with the Quran or glorifying, holding the Quran at a great status. What if I'm not a hafiz, I'm not this, but at least there is some level of status and respect for the Quran. أجمع المسلمون, consensus of all Muslims, not scholars, على وجوب تعظيم القرآن, that it's obligatory that the Quran should be glorified, respected. Obviously not worship, but respect. This is the book, the kalam of Allah. This is the kalam of Allah. على الإطلاق وتنزيهه وصيانته وأجمعوا. There's a consensus. على أن من جحد منه حرفا. There's a consensus. If somebody rejects one letter of المتواتر, of ما المجمع عليه. Mutawatir is all, the whole Quran as we know of. If somebody said no, it is not alhamdulillahi, it's alhaddulillahi, skip the meme for example. Not only for al-Fatiha, of any letter, أو زاد حرفا, or increase, add one letter, لم يقرأ به أحد, which is not passed on, وهو عالم, intentionally he knows that, what is his situation? Kafir, he is out of Islam. Adding one letter or taking off one letter intentionally, and he knows that is out of Islam. That's how much respected is the Quran. Yeah, we don't want to talk about other people and other religions and other people that they have whole chapters that you find it in this denomination, but it's not there, or it's totally different. Not even an extra letter. And I will just say that وَمَنِ اسْتَخَفَّ بِالْقُرْآنِ أَوْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنْهُ أَوْ بِالْمُصْحَفِ, until he said فَهُوَ كَافِرٌ. If you are belittling, acting in a way to belittle, disrespect the Mus'haf, either the whole Quran or some of it, joking, you joke about one Quran, one ayah, one surah, talking in such a way that puts the Quran down, these are not, Imam al-Nawawi is not takfiri, or this is a scholar. He is outside of Islam. And that's why you see Muslims around the world, they don't allow anybody to touch the Quran. I don't agree with a lot of stuff, but the heat in their heart is based on us. They don't get it. Other people, they think their holy books, our holy book is just like their holy books. They can play with it. They can take it to the bathroom. But for us, it is the most holy book.
I'd like to just read word by word the section Imam Nawawi recite, because it's so beautiful, subhanAllah. He says that having sincerity regarding the book of Allah is believing that is His speech and His revelation. It does not resemble anything like the speech of creation, and that people are incapable of producing anything like it. Sincerity is extolling its glory while reciting it, the hayba, and giving its recitation its just due by beautifying it, like we mentioned earlier, being humble while doing so, and by correctly pronouncing its letters. Sincerity is defending it from the misinterpretation of the deviants. And he mentions later that only the alim is allowed to do interpretation or tafsir of the Quran. If someone doesn't know, like one isn't able to just like teach the Quran by guessing. I think it says this and I think it says no. You have to have knowledge and expertise if you know it. If you want to talk about it. And he says defending it from misinterpretation of deviants and from the opposition of tyrants, believing in everything that it contains, not exceeding its boundaries, and understanding its knowledge and examples. It is paying attention to its exhortations, pondering its wonders, and acting according to what has unequivocally revealed, submitting to what is open to interpretation, searching out its universals, the am, and restricted, the khas, its nasikh wal mansukh, abrogating and abrogated, propagating its sciences and calling others to them, and to all the sincere counsels that we have mentioned. After we've tasted it, when we share it with others. Subhanallah.
Imam Nawawi, he also has a bab here where he talks about when it comes to doing tafsir of the Quran, and he mentions a lot of different points, but a quick summary basically is that a person who is not someone who is equipped to do tafsir of the Quran, then he should always refer back to those who are equipped. So if you ever want to explain an ayah, or explain what Allah Azza wa Jalla is saying, or the meaning of the ayah, you should always refer back or quote someone who's qualified to be explaining the ayah. You always want to have between you and Allah's what Allah meant a barrier. So that way you're not saying anything out of about the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. That's not that which is not within it, right? And he mentions a lot of different things, and he also goes forth and he mentions how even if someone knows the Arabic language, they still have to know a lot of other rulings and a lot of other sciences of Islam to be able to interpret the Quran. So just knowing the Arabic language by itself is not enough for someone to interpret the Quran and so forth. So basically, whenever it comes to understanding or doing a tafsir of the Quran, then as Muslims we should be very careful. Number one, when we ourselves attempt to explain or do tafsir of the Quran, and number two, when we listen to someone who is doing tafsir of the Quran. If the person we're listening to is not referring back to the ahadith, he's not referring back to the Sahaba, he's not referring back to the scholars of tafsir, then we should question it because we might not be able to discern if what that person is saying is from their own thoughts and their own expressions, or it's something that has come to us through correct narration.
Next, we have a few more points, inshallah, or several more points, but we're trying to summarize. Quran can be used for nafth or ruqya or naqsh. Can it be written for barakah? Can it be blown for barakah, for blessing or shifa or cure? لا يقرأ النفث للرؤية والقراءة. Nafth is basically without anything coming out its ear, blowing air. So that can be done in water and you drink it. That can be done in your hand and wipe over your body. That can be done. Some scholars they dislike doing it, but majority of them in following of what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to do in dua, he would recite, for example, the last 3 surahs before he sleeps, and he go over his body. So that can be done as well. Writing the Quran, the sheikh, because he's a faqih, mashallah, he will take you into the different arguments left and right, who said what on the other side, what are the evidence of everybody. Writing down the Quran on the qibla, for example, at home. There's some scholars who disagree with that. They think it might be disrespectful for the Quran, or that's not what it's meant for. It's meant for to be recited, to be reflected, to be memorized, or reflected and pondered over. But basically, actually, it depends on what you're doing it for. When you have something that looks nice, and Ayatul Kursi, for example, those nice ornaments and stuff. And actually, some of the Salaf, they استحبوا كتابة الآية في القبلة. They recommended to write one ayah in the qibla and so on. So it depends on the way it is done. We should not ever disrespect the Quran in any way. But if it is done in a respectful way, it should be good to do. Naam? Same thing, they disagreed about that. Shall we write down the Quran? And we're talking Quran only and exclusively. Let's say, I've seen some people, actually, Dr. Nahas provided a beautiful, it's not that exactly. The whole Quran is written in one. Can you open this door and bring it, Hadi? The whole Quran is written in one sign or paper, obviously in so small. So if somebody wants to have that and hang it on the wall, that's the whole Quran spread in my house. What's wrong? There's nothing wrong with that. If somebody wants to do it and he believes Surah Qul Huwallahu Ahad, yes, it should be in your heart and reflected over and everything. But if I want to have Surah Qul Huwallahu Ahad and I love it and I love it to keep it with me, that is fine. However, you don't just write it down. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had Muhammadur Rasulullah, the name of Allah, ala naqshi khatamihi, and when he go to bathroom, he would cover the name of Allah, basically switch it to that. That's the whole Quran here, brothers. Can you turn it around, show them? The whole Quran right there. MashaAllah. Jazakallah khair, brother Nahas. So, اختلفوا فيه يعني.
Yeah, and it was actually narrated from some of the Sahaba radwanullah alayhim that they would write like the hijab that you mentioned, some Quran, as Sheikh said, only like things from the Quran and the Sunnah ad'iyah, and put it, on like a necklace for their little kids, to protect them. The best is for the person to read the Quran, the ad'iyah, but someone who's like very, very little kid, they're not able to read it, so they would hang it on them to protect them from magic or protect them from jinn and any, evil eye and that kind of.
And it has been the norm of, I haven't seen it here, for a lot of Muslims to get the Mus'haf and put it on the dashboard on the car for protection. That's the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected. These kind of attachment to the signs of the deen are generally speaking okay. It's not the Quran itself that would protect, but because it's the kalima of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Moving forward to, what about? Hold it. Not right. Generally speaking, not right. Generally speaking, not right. Right. Again, we go with the general and common sense of everything. Maybe somebody is putting it aside, like maybe there's no way. Yeah, but I mean, no, it's not done in, take it as a rule. If something is done in a disrespectful way, that's actually brought to show people the respect of the Quran. So take it as a rule and apply it yourself. If something is disrespectful, it might be disrespectful in one place, not very disrespectful in a different place. So, but respect or disrespect is always in the heart, and it's also reflected on the action. Like teaching the Quran for somebody who's not Muslim, for a kafir. Can we teach him Quran? Obviously, we can make him hear the Quran, listen to the best da'wah is to share Quran with somebody who is not a Muslim. But touching the Mus'haf, he should not be allowed to touch the Mus'haf. We were talking about only Muslim, only people who have wudu, according to many scholars. Now this is najis, this is kafir, najis, impure because of their faith, and impure because of their they never took a shower, basically. So but that does not apply to the translation, the English or whatever language. Quran is only the Mus'haf, the one in Arabic. If we move forward to the next chapter, Brother Abdullah. Arabic and English is take that. Mus'haf is the word for the book that has the Quran entirely in Arabic. All the rules about Mus'haf apply to that. If something has anything else, that's not a Mus'haf. Book of tafsir that has the whole Quran plus some comments from anybody, that's not Quran. Any translation, even if it's the whole Arabic and translation, that's not Mus'haf. And that's actually the very reason. No, probably some of you, I'm not sure if you are aware of that. This is the very reason Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu burned different masahif. You're aware of that, and that argument is usually used by mulhidun, people who hate Islam, and they have he burned the Mus'haf. Basically, the Quran was being revealed during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Ayah by ayah, or couple of ayat, or one surah, or one portion, and he would call somebody, go write these two ayat in that place, after this and before that, in this surah, right? So it was still being revealed. Some of the Sahaba who know how to read and write, there's no one Mus'haf yet, because it's in the process of revelation. So they would hear one ayah from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam or one surah, they're still in the process of learning, they would write it down. He was also saying hadith along with that sometimes, and not all Sahaba at the same levels. They would write the Quran, they went tonight for Salat al-Isha, they heard two new ayat and maybe one hadith, he said, obviously they did not have the luxury of different notes and notebooks. It's all, if you have one piece of skin, you're lucky. So they would write down everything there. There's Quran. Maybe not everybody knows the order so far because it's the process of revelation. And then there's some hadith, and then there's some comments. Ubay ibn Ka'b had his own. That's my own notebook. And I make my own comments. I heard this from the Prophet. I heard this ayah. When Sayyidina Uthman verified everything, even with the approval of the same people, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Ubay ibn Ka'b, and everybody, and then he got it not once, twice. It was done during Abu Bakr's time and then during Uthman's time. They finished the Mus'haf to have all the Quran exclusively, no comment, no hadith, nothing. Then he asked everybody else, he made it obligatory or mandatory. Everyone who has any Quran notes should burn them now. Why? Because they shouldn't be mixed with anything. Now this is the Mus'haf, and we're going to make copies and give it to everybody, or give it to all regions.
And so we go now to, you want to share something?
Yes, please. No, go ahead.
Al-Fasl al-Thamin, the 8th chapter, almost done, inshallah ta'ala. But he mentions that there are so many times and days in which it's recommended to read the Quran. What's the first one he mentions? شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن اللهم بلغنا رمضان وباركنا لنا فيه يا رب.
Especially the last 10 nights.
The last 10 days and nights. All right, and then he says the odd nights being more emphasized. The first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah, ما من أيام العمل الصالح فيها أحب إلى الله من هذه الأيام، يعني أيام العشر ذو الحجة. ويوم العرفة, right, the day of Arafah, Friday, after dawn, after Fajr, وقرآن الفجر إن قرآن الفجر كان مشهودا, and during the night, all throughout the night, it's mustahab. And then he said there are many surahs in which we should be observant and reciting. Yasin, our teachers would recite that every day after Fajr. Al-Waqi'ah, which they would recite it after Asr usually. Surah Al-Mulk, which the Prophet ﷺ said reciting Surah Al-Mulk at night protects one from the punishment of the grave. May Allah protect us, Ya Rabb. And the Mu'awwadat, right? Ikhlas, and Al-Falaq, and An-Nas. Or what are the three Qul, some people call them. Ayat Al-Kursi, the verse of the throne.
Al-Kahf on Fridays, as we
Al-Kahf
all
on
know.
Friday.
There are several surahs recommended to do in Sunnah al-Subh or al-Fajr, they call it Subh, to قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Several other places, Salatul Istikhara, same thing for Salatul Istikhara. في الوتر سبح اسم ربك الأعلى. These are قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Friday, special surahs, maybe recited as Sajda and Al-Insan, and so on.
And then he mentions that before going to sleep, as Sheikh mentioned, the Prophet ﷺ would read the Mu'awwadat and do what they call the
Nafth.
Nafth? Not natif, alright?
Nafth.
He would do like nafth, and he would spit without actually saliva coming, but just that.
Blowing air.
And then he would cover his whole entire face and body with it. He also mentions that before going to sleep, the Prophet ﷺ said the last two verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, آمن الرسول until the end. He said, "Man qara'ahuma fi laylatin kafatah." They will suffice him from calamities. That's what the scholars added. They will suffice him from calamities, from shaitan, from any problems that would happen. And then he said, "عند المرض" as well. You read Al-Fatiha, Ayat Al-Kursi, Al-Mu'awwadat, and ويقرأ عند الميت Yasin for the dead person. And there's a lot more, as Sheikh mentioned.
As far as touching the Mus'haf, should I have wudu? That's the big discussion for having tahara in general to touch the Mus'haf, and the majority of scholars believe yes, you do have to have tahara to touch the Mus'haf, not reading, to touch the Mus'haf. لا يمسه إلا المطهرون تنزيل من رب العالمين. It shouldn't be touched by anybody except the mutahharun, purified. It's tanzil or revelation from the Lord of the worlds. But some scholars argued that this is actually not talking about Quran in specific. What is it talking about? فلا أقسم بمواقع النجوم وإنه لقسم لو تعلمون إنه لقرآن كريم في كتاب مكنون. This Quran, yes, and then he said it's in a book which is maknoon, preserved up there. So it's talking about the preserved tablet, the Lawh al-Mahfuz. And then what is it? لا يمسه. Nobody touches it except the purified angels. Purified angels can have access to that, whether it is the Quran or Lawh al-Mahfuz. So you better have wudu to touch the Mus'haf. But especially for ta'lim and ta'allum, teaching, learning, when it becomes difficult, when it's going to be a barrier between you and reading, if you cannot read by heart, then there is no problem, inshallah. However, we should always try to be in a state of wudu or tahara to touch the Mus'haf. Allahu a'lam. Nothing of that applies to anything other than the Mus'haf. And I give the explanation, which is the full Quran written in Arabic only. That's the Mus'haf. Tafsir doesn't apply. The translation doesn't apply. Portions of Quran does not apply. It's good, it's better to, out of respect in this case, even if for the translation, because it's translation of the meaning. But this sanctity, if you wish, is held هذه القدسية للكتاب الذي هو المصحف. طيب اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد. Selling and buying the Mus'haf, obviously, that's even this scholars talked about. But again, it doesn't apply to where we're at right now. Mus'haf is not mainly to make money off of, but if you say no, you cannot sell it, you cannot buy it, then it's not going to be printed, it's not going to be available, and people do that. That's their business, that's their life. So there's obviously no problem whatsoever.
And as Sheikh Amr, said, the scholars generally agreed that one has to have wudu if he touches the Mus'haf, right? They mentioned the ta'allum with ta'aleem for teaching and learning. One doesn't, especially a sabi, someone who hasn't hit puberty yet. For them it's very difficult. Imam Nawawi here says هل يجب على الولي والمعلم تكليف الصبي المميز الطهارة للمصحف واللوح الذين يقرأ فيهما أصحهما لا يلزمه. That you don't have to, because it's hard. Someone is a little kid to always make wudu, touch the Mus'haf, and we can teach him Quran without having him make wudu. And I think that's pretty much it.
Unless the Mashaykh has any other comments, we'll open the door for questions,
open the door
inshallah.
for questions now.
For everybody. Dr. Aziz, then brother.
Okay. This is about the Surah Al-Baqarah. In connection to the Siyam. يريد الله بكم اليسر ولا يريد بكم العسر. Now, does it apply just to this particular situation, or it could be also used for some other ahkams?
Actually, this is one of the main. You remember we discussed, I think, several months ago, some of the قواعد الفقهية, some of the overall general rules of fiqh or of Islam in general. One of them is this: is the whole one of the whole overall intentions or goals of this deen is to bring ease for people, is to make things easy for people. When things المشقة تجلب التيسير. These are rules that the scholars developed or derived from the Quran and from the Sunnah. So when it becomes difficult to pray because you're traveling, Allah will make it easy for you. Pray only two, combine. When it becomes difficult to do something, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will let it go from you. So that's an overall rule, not just for Siyam.
Who makes the decision for, like keeping the fasting, how difficult it is for
The person,
somebody who is
the
sick?
person themselves, because this is their deen, not anybody else. Because mashaqqa, it could be difficult for you, not for me. Could be difficult for me, not for you. Everybody, this is the deen of everybody between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Thank you.
And then I'd like to mention about like these general, they call it قواعد فقهية, right? Like fiqhi principles.
Tamam.
We have to have like a faqih or a jurist, apply it like to the specific, time. You have to always go back to what they mentioned, because not like sometimes people say, oh, like just the niyyah is what matters, or like الضرورات تبيح المحظورات, and it's not even ضرورة, and then like they say, oh, you don't have to wear hijab, you don't have to do this, you don't have to wear, do that. And sometimes these principles are applied out of their context. We always have to go back to what the scholars mentioned, in terms of the context.
Brother Muhammad, inshallah, and then just for order. I promise. Oh, انت ما كنتش موجود امبارح. We talked. Brother Zakir, there's some kind of feedback if you can help us with this. It doesn't generally apply to the rules of the Mus'haf in general, because it's not the Mus'haf. However, it should be respected because it has Quran. If you want to put it on the floor, close the app. Don't leave the app open and go to the bathroom. That's out of respect for the Quran in general. But that in and of itself does not take the rules of the Mus'haf. Otherwise, you will not touch the phone. It's already saved there. But it's saved in a form of 0101, whatever the technology is. But the Quran, which is written, as we know of, that's the one that takes the sanctity.
Is only few words. It's not more than 50%, as some people say.
You would find some scholars say if it's majority of Quran or it's considered to be a Mus'haf, then you deal with it like a Mus'haf. But we do have the scholars even who argue that even the whole Quran, if you are not حدث أصغر we're not talking about janaba or حدث أكبر or that. We're talking about not just having wudu or something. Dr. Tamim.
When you talk about مواقع السجدات في القرآن كنت تتكلم على الصلاة أم القراءة خارج الصلاة سنة وفرض.
Inside and outside Salah, the ruling is the same. It's Sunnah, according to majority of the scholars. Imam Abu Hanifa said wajib. You said as sajda, you have to make sujood. But rest of the scholars, they said it's not mandatory. It is recommended because the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, according to some hadith, he passed by the ayah of a sajda, he made sujood. Other times he did not make sujood. So that tells us that it is not obligatory. In salah and outside salah.
And also they mentioned that if someone is either they don't have wudu, so they're not able to do sujood tilawah, because they mentioned there's a agreement between the scholars that one has to have wudu and satr al-awra and face the qibla and everything, because it's just like salah, what the scholars mentioned, for madhahib, that sujood tilawah is just like salah, so we have to have all the shurut. So if you don't have wudu and you're not able to, then what do? We say subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah Allahu akbar, 4 times. To replace.
Exactly, and that reminds me of another thing suggested by Imam Abu Hanifa, as far as I remember. I'm not sure if other scholars suggested that. He said, what if you don't have wudu or you're not in a position to make sujood? Then al-maqdur la yasqutu bil-ma'sur, another fiqhi. So at least you cannot make full sujood. What you can make is bow down your head. Just bow down. That's Hanafi, in the Hanafi school of thought. I was very young, and my dad, Allah yarhamu, is driving. and Quran is playing. He passes by sajda. I think I mentioned that before. He's driving, and it's super dangerous to drive in Egypt unless you're like having 7 eyes and 7 ears and everything, like Pakistan and all of these, and New York City here, right? And he ayat al-sajda, and he's like, Baba, right? I wasn't aware of Madhab Abu Hanifa. Later on, wallahi, I learned Imam Abu Hanifa, he suggested to bow down. I was like, subhanallah. Yeah, he was right. But not while driving, obviously. Yeah, any sisters? بخير. تفضل Dr. Yusuf, then Brother Ali, or
memorizing the Quran and it has a sujood inside, So they're probably going back and forth. So what do you recommend,
back and forth for what
Like
again?
if they're trying to memorize the surah, it has a sujood,
It's not obligatory. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, they talked about repetition of sujood. Go ahead, Abdul.
Yeah, like they mentioned, if you know that you're gonna repeat it over and over and over again, they just said repeat it, and then at the end, for example, just do one sujood for all of them. You could do it that way.
Two things, Sheikh. When you reading the Quran, the Mus'haf itself, the physical one, and you came to ayah with sujood, the best way to hold in your hand or under your arm?
In any respectable way. That's not something that the scholars would define and suggest. Hold it in a respectful way. So a disrespectful way is I'm reading, that's not Quran, and I'm here, sajda. That's not disrespectful. I'm holding it, it's in my hand, it touches the floor. Touching the floor, it's not bad in and of itself, and I'm making sujood. Nothing wrong. I ended up even having to do nothing wrong. It's all respecting the Mus'haf and respecting the sujood.
Or you can hold it under your arm.
Or you can hold it. There's nothing wrong with that. But you never know. Maybe in one culture, in one place, if you hold it like this is so disrespectful. I'm not aware of anything like that, right? But Pakistanis tell me, I was once talking to somebody and I was making them say, oh my God, that's very disrespectful in Pakistani. Is it? Yeah, so I mean, I was just like, that ends up being disrespect. I'm sorry, brothers, Pakistanis. Disrespect. I didn't mean to, but maybe one gesture, one thing in one culture that. But generally speaking, respecting the Quran. Any brothers? Any sisters? Oh,
So
brothers.
the ayah, Sheikh, لا يمسه إلا المطهرون.
No.
Is it the physical tahara or the spiritual tahara? Because could be also the meaning, the kitab al-maknoon, the dur al-maknoon. To get the meaning, you have to have this stage of spiritual tahara to come close to the meaning.
I think some of the scholars, they mentioned that if you look in the hadith in the Quran, generally when you look at tahara, the word tahara is mentioned for physical, not spiritual. Because when Allah Azza wa Jalla, He talks about the mushrikun, He says, إِنَّمَا الْمُشْرِكُونَ نَجَسٌ. And when the Prophet ﷺ, he spoke to the companion, he said, Al-mu'min la yanjus, that he doesn't become like spiritually impure. And obviously the Shaykh would be able to elaborate more. But I think they mentioned that generally most of the evidences when they mention tahara is talking about physical impurity,
في
not
tahara
spiritual.
في يتطهرون ويتطهرون. There's two different words.
Yeah, and then what even I know is that even the scholars who argued that it's spiritual impurity and that it's the Lawh al-Mahfuz, even those same scholars, they still said you need to have wudu and touch the Mus'haf because the dalil for the hurma of touching the Mus'haf without wudu isn't those ayat. It's not those ayat. It's the hadith لا يمس المصحف إلا طاهر, the Prophet ﷺ said. And then Sahaba, like that was the fatwa of the Sahaba radhiyallahu anhum, and the amal of the Salaf is that that was their hukum. So it's not just those ayat. Even we have a different tafsir, but there's other adilla.
Najasa ma'nawiyya. Right.
معنوية, yeah.
Yes.
So if I'm driving Sheikh Amr and I do like this for sajda and get an accident, can I mention your name? That our Imam said,
It would be too late, brother.
no, if I survive, if I don't die.
حفظك الله. Ya Allah protect you. Amin ya Rabbi. Okay, so yes, inshallah we can. But just giving chance for everybody. We have a few more minutes. If anybody has any question or
So in some culture they wear those things which is ayahs of Quran, and they put it as a necklace. Is it something from Islam or the Deen, or is it something totally from the Hindu culture?
no, let's agree that the Quran has been mainly revealed. The default case is that it is to be understood implemented, respected in general. So that's the main focus goal or goal of it right now. If your way of respecting it or seeking the barakah of it, besides all of these, is to have one ayah, is to have Muhammadur Rasulullah on the here, is to have it written on the wall, is to do anything out of respect. I remember one sister, I think she was from Pakistan or somewhere, Uzbekistan, somewhere, I don't know. That's her own way of respecting it. She had to write down the whole Quran with a, what is it? She sewn it, basically sewing. Yeah, I always have a problem with this verb. So she was sewing it, not sewing it, sewing it into like the whole Quran. You look it up. She spent into this process, I don't know, 30 years, but that was her own way of getting to Allah, and it came out beautiful. Writing it down, did you get it? خيطت بالخياطة يعني the whole Quran. So any way that shows respect, but pay attention in this case. If somebody has an ayah and decided to put an ayah, obviously scholars would disagree. Yes, it's good. Yes, it's bad, depending on how do you look at it. But if you go to restroom, for example, if you go take a shower, then this is not something, unless you would pay attention to put it aside. Naam? Yeah. Alayhi salam. So yes. Fine. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. If she has to take a shower, she will take it off. Fine. No problem. And we have these famous necklaces, MashaAllah, and all of these things, famous for people, right? MashaAllah, it's called like this. You go buy a gold necklace, MashaAllah. Go buy this, it has MashaAllah on it. Some of them, they have even as the shape of Quran, and you open and you can recite some ayat. That's fine, that's okay too. Tattoos of Quran, we're getting to a totally different level now, brother. That needs some kind of fatwa from okay. It's like what? Selling whatever. Anyways, so yeah. Saying Bismillah before you eat work. Yeah. Alhamdulillah. Jazakum Allah khair. Let's conclude with making a special dua. This was one of Majalis al-Ilm. نرجو الله سبحانه وتعالى بركاته. نبدأ إن شاء الله من الشيخ أصيرة. He can make dua for us and then we go down there.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي بنعمته تتم الصالحات. اللهم إنا نسألك بأن لك الحمد لا إله إلا أنت المنان بديع السماوات والأرض يا ذا الجلال والإكرام يا حي يا قيوم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. اللهم اجعلها خالصا لوجهك يا رب العالمين. اللهم ارحمنا بالقرآن واغفر لنا بالقرآن واشفنا بالقرآن وارفعنا بالقرآن يا رب العالمين. اللهم نسينا منه ما ذكرنا وعلمنا منه ما جهلنا وارزقنا تلاوته آناء الليل وآناء النهار على الوجه الذي يرضيك عنا. اللهم اجعلنا ممن يقرأ القرآن فيرقى ولا يجعلنا ممن يقرأ القرآن فيشقى.
آمين يا رب العالمين. اسمع الكلام.
يا ربي لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك. اللهم صل على سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وإسرافنا في أمرنا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا. ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به. واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا. أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب.
آمين يا رب. اللهم نورنا بنور القرآن وزينا بزينة القرآن واجعلنا من أهل القرآن وحملة القرآن قائمين به وعاملين به ومحافظين له ومقيمين لحدوده ولشعائره يا رب العالمين. Oh Allah, fill our hearts with the light of Quran, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Fill our hearts with the love of Quran, Ya Rabbil Alameen. Oh Allah, give us the understanding of the Quran. Give us the amal of the Quran. Give us the direction of the Quran. Make us live on Quran and die on Quran and be resurrected in the day of judgment with Quran, and make Quran our shafi', intercessor for us on the day of judgment, Ya Rabbil Alameen. اللهم إنا نسألك حبك وحب من يحبك وحب كل قول وعمل يقربنا إلى حبك، واجعل حبك أحب الأشياء إلينا. اللهم بلغنا رمضان، اللهم بلغنا رمضان، اللهم بلغنا رمضان، وأعنا فيه على الصيام والقيام وقراءة القرآن يا رب العالمين. اللهم اغفر لشيخنا وإمامنا الإمام النووي حجة الإسلام يا رب العالمين. اللهم ارحمه برحمتك واجمعنا به مع نبينا وحبيبنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم في دار كرامتك ومستقر رحمتك يا رب العالمين. اللهم اغفر له ولجميع علمائنا وسادتنا وعلماء المسلمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم اغفر لآبائنا وأمهاتنا وارحمنا بالقرآن وانفعنا وارفعنا بالقرآن يا رب العالمين. اللهم اغفر لنا ولآبائنا وأمهاتنا وأزواجنا وأبنائنا وكل من له حق علينا والمسلمين أجمعين بحق القرآن يا رب العالمين. وصلى اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين، وجزاكم الله خيرا. وإياكم.